Welcome on into BKL Nightly. I'm Thad Brown with Caleb Carr, Rachel Liebert. It is the Thursday after the Pegula Bean press conference to explain the firing of Sean McDermott and to go over the end of 2025. We got a lot to get to from that press conference, some leftover thoughts, looking ahead to who the next coach might be as well. So, guys, this is the first time in a long time that we don't have breaking news. We don't have a giant playoff game looming, whatever contest is looming, injuries to go over. Really, this is kind of like the first exhale show in a long time. So what I want to start with today is just go back to yesterday. We've all had kind of a day to marinate on it. And Caleb, I'll start with you. What are you thinking about? What are you reacting from? You didn't get to talk about this yesterday at all. In terms of anywhere you want to go with this press conference, what are you kind of taking from it 24 hours later?
For me, watching it felt a lot like going on a roller coaster. There were moments that I was like, okay, that's a good answer. They're handling this well. And then 5 seconds later, I'd be like, what are you talking about? What does that even mean? So it very much felt, I thought for the most part, Brandon Beane handled himself in a decent manner. I thought his answers made sense. Now, obviously, I'm sure he met with the PR people and they were kind of whatever. But I mean, credit to, I believe you were in Buffalo, correct, Thad?
Yeah.
Credit to all the reporters there. I mean, you asked the tough questions and you kind of forced them into corners. But I thought Brandon Beane did a really good job. Can't really say the same about Terry Pegula. There were moments where I was like, I don't know what he is trying to get at here. I will say that my thoughts on Beane not being fired, but not only not being fired, but also being promoted are probably right where they were before the press conference, which I'm going to take as a positive because I was fully going into it expecting to absolutely hate it even more. But outside of that, it just felt chaotic, I guess, if I had to sum it up in one word, and it just felt unsuccessful. I guess I don't feel like we really got a ton of good stuff out of it. Like it just didn't feel like something like a press conference like this. The goal for the GM and the owner is to put the fan base's mind at ease. And I don't think they did that at all.
So real quick, we got lots of good stuff. Maybe not good stuff from the team.
Okay, yes.
Good stuff for us.
Yes.
Great content stuff.
From the point of view of their goal is to ease the mind of the media. And well, obviously the mind of the media is never going to be eased. Right. But to ease the mind of the fan base, as someone who's part of the fan base, my mind was not eased at any sense. Now, from the media point of view, we're rolling it.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, we've got content out of our ears.
Right.
But
rolling in it is a great visual. And you're right. The one thing, I've got a different thought I'll get to in a minute. But the one thing I do want to say about the media asking good questions and appreciated, I didn't have a lot of questions yesterday. That was a lot of Matt Perino and Jay Skursky and Sal Marion and guys. And they did a really good job.
Yes.
I will say that I was not nervous, but I did want a performance out of us from that press conference because there's always an opinion or an expectation that Buffalo media, being the small market, is going to be soft. And I don't think we've been good with that. I think this has been actually the best season I've ever been a part of for asking the right question, doing it respectfully, and getting a respectful answer. I've never been around a Bills team, Sean McDermott at the top of this, who was open enough to say, hey, you got a question? Ask the question. And while the press conference did go sideways for the team, I did think that the reporters, us gathered together, did a good job. We didn't get to everything, but I think it was certainly a 9 out of 10 day for sure, at the very least.
No, definitely.
Rachel?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was successful in the questions that were asked, but I agree with Caleb that unsuccessful might be the overarching theme of what came out of it, especially on Pegula's side. I mean, Brandon Beane looked fine. I kind of disagree. I mean, Caleb said you kind of felt the same about the Brandon Beane promotion. For me, I felt a little bit worse, honestly, because there wasn't as much of an explanation as I thought there was going to be. But still, I would say unsuccessful and roller coaster are some pretty good adjectives to describe what went down yesterday. The
word I had from this, thinking about it, is unprepared.
Yeah.
When you think about Terry Pegula saying that the firing happened basically on a whim while he's standing in the locker room on Saturday night, that press conference and really everything that happened since Monday looked like that, because the press release was not handled well. Sean McDermott's goodbye was not handled well. They had 48 hours to get ready for this. You'd think they'd be ready for this press conference. This was not handled well. You would, and this is me assuming a little bit, but if you're the Browns or the Raiders, you would think that organization probably, even if they haven't made the decision yet, has time to think about, okay, there's a chance we're going to do this. How do we want it to look? What do we want to do? This was not that. Seems like it was clearly they decided on Saturday, and everybody at One Bills Drive had to figure out how to handle the old firing the coach thing, because this media group has never gone through it. This public relations group team has never gone through it. They came in with Sean McDermott. Not that they don't know how to do it. They're a PR team. But this felt like an example of a team that was not prepared to be doing this week, even from the point of view of they probably thought they'd be getting ready for a game this week.
Yeah.
Let alone, getting ready to talk about a fired coach. So everything that I think we saw last few days, to me, the word is unprepared.
And you saw that in Terry Pagula's answers, or
For
lack
sure.
of, for sure. I mean, I honestly didn't even think of that, but they were underprepared because this was 48 hours of, not even 48 hours notice of when this happened. So yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
The major fallout from this press conference, although it was about Sean McDermott, also Keon Coleman kind of caught a stray yesterday in terms of being the guy who was in the eye of the storm from one part of the conversation, with Terry Pagula making it clear to everybody that Keon Coleman was a guy that Brandon Beane did not want, even though Brandon Beane spent most of the press conference trying to kind of walk that back a little bit. Here is that soundbite. I want to play the bite again, and then we're going to talk about kind of the reaction today from what was said with this yesterday.
Yeah,
Can I interrupt? I'll address the Keon situation. The coaching staff pushed to draft Keon. I'm not saying Brandon wouldn't have drafted him, but he wasn't his next choice. That was Brandon being a team player and taking advice of his coaching staff, who felt strongly about the player. And, he's taken, for some reason, heat over it and not saying a word about it. But I'm here to tell you the true story.
The question from that caused that answer was about the receiver room in general, and Keon's name was brought up, kind of not as a specific about Keon, but because he's the most recent, I think, miss, and certainly the miss with the biggest asset spend on it, with the high second round pick. It wasn't about Keon in particular, but Terry Pagula made it about Keon. The reason I want to bring up today, though, is that the discussion has kind of split between a large group of people who say it was unfair for a 22-year-old to get skewered in the media like that, or to skewered publicly like that for a press conference that he really had nothing to do with. And then there's another side that says, well, you know what? The owner can kind of say what he wants to a degree, and Keon Coleman kind of deserved it a little bit because it's not like he's been a model citizen. Rachel, I'll start with you. Where do you kind of land with this whole discussion today?
I have so many thoughts. I'm trying to sort them all in my head. I feel like, okay, Keon has kind of done this narrative to himself. I mean, on top of him not performing just on the field, the disciplinary issues have been a thing. However, I do kind of agree that that was kind of an unnecessary comment for them to make, especially too we don't know what the future looks like with Keon and the Bills, but if you have a guy that's not performing the way you want him to and has been immature, and that's how they've described him in the media, I feel like saying this comment about him just takes it a step back. I mean, why would Keon Coleman want to try to be something for this team now when your owner's publicly just saying, our GM didn't even want you, essentially? I mean, I understand where people saying, Keon kind of dug his own grave and this is part of his own doing, but I don't think that was the way to handle it. And I don't think, even if that wasn't the message Terry Pagula was trying to get across, it wasn't right. He didn't say it correctly if that was not what he was trying to say. So I don't feel for Keon because this is, this has been an ongoing saga, but I do think it could have been handled a lot better than the way it was.
For starters, I wasn't in yesterday, so I was watching at my house and I was doing dishes while this press conference was going on. So I was like 90% actually listening and 10% doing another task. When Pagula brought up Keon Coleman, I stopped and was like, did I miss
That's exactly what I said. And funny story, I was also doing dishes when I heard that. I'm not even joking.
Everybody.
I'm not even joking.
So I rewinded so I could re-listen to it because I was like, where did Keon Coleman come from? So as much as I agree that I don't think any player no matter if you've done a good job or a bad job. Like if the question wasn't even about Keon Coleman, him being drug into it is like kind of just out of pocket. It's just not completely fair for him. But in the same sense, I don't care how young you are a professional athlete. You have gotten this far. You've put yourself here, even without like the immature stuff that Keon's done. You're in the spotlight. It doesn't matter who you are. Josh Allen's in the spotlight. Anybody on the team, on the active roster, can at any point get their name dropped in a press conference just because they're in the spotlight. It doesn't matter. So I do think it's unfair, but I also think like he's there. And then on top of that, like Rachel said, you haven't really made a positive name for yourself, especially this year. So for your name to be at the top of this list of like bad things that Sean McDermott has done or bad things that this team has done, especially around the receiver room, it's not really much of a surprise.
I love that we have the most responsible Bill show in the world with you guys getting the dishes done yesterday, multitasking while the press conference was going on. I'm generally with you guys. Keon Coleman should not have been used as a pawn in that way. And Terry Pegula trying to promote Brandon Beane and dismiss the Sean McDermott contributions or even lay some, make it sound like he doesn't know what he's doing, and using Keon as the pawn in that was not the way I would have gone about it. And it was unfortunate that Keon was the pawn, but he ain't done nothing to prevent anybody from using him in that way. And like Caleb said, and Josh Reed, I think, laid this out beautifully earlier today, he plays a big boy sport and gets a big boy paycheck. Then you got to treat him like a big boy. And that means showing up on time for meetings, taking care of your stuff. It'd be one thing if Keon had just been a bad player, but had been a good soldier and been coming on time and just they keep running him out there and they try and he's just not good enough, then I'd feel bad for him. Yeah. But if you're going to be a professional, you're going to get treated like a professional all the way around, and that includes taking the heat when you're not doing the things you're supposed to be doing. Speaking of taking the heat, one of the things that really made waves earlier this year, Brandon Beane, when he was on Buffalo Radio talking about wide receivers after the draft, he said that it was one of the worst arguments ever, really was vehement about how much he hated the idea that he hadn't done enough at receiver. Well, at the press conference yesterday, he did get a question about whether or not he regretted that rant, and here's what he said.
Do I regret how it's turned out? Sure. It was not meant to be condescending. It was me having a little bit of too much passion, I guess, if you want to say, hey, I shouldn't have done that. At the end of the day, it wasn't. I had nothing against those hosts. I think I did another interview with those guys. I've done them before. I did it at training camp when the next opportunity was. So it wasn't anything personal or anything like that. It was just more coming to the defense of our players because I felt like they were being picked on and they couldn't defend themselves.
How much do we buy, or how much do you think that was the right way for him to address it? I think for me, he still kind of believes himself there. He's not saying I was wrong. He says maybe I had a little too much passion, which I get. I still think that he feels like it wasn't even the wrong thing, the receiver group he brought in. He knows it fell short, but it doesn't feel like it was wrong. But Rachel, how do you feel about the way he treated what was something that we touched on time and again? We never really went away from it all season long.
I feel like there's two parts of this for me. The first part is just him being passionate in defending a group of guys that he's brought in and, he truly does believe in. And I do believe the statement of him saying too much passion, I mean, that was what it was, is fine. And I think that side of it is he handled it okay. But I think the other side of it is the reality of the situation is your receiver group wasn't fine. And I don't think that was really addressed in the entire narrative. I mean, that was what you would expect him to say. And like I said, I think he truly does feel that way and still believes in the group that he has. But I do wish he would have, maybe taken a step back and said, yes, I said all of this. And in hindsight, maybe I wasn't 100%, correct about, being this passionate about
or even 30% maybe.
Or even 30 or even 15 or 10 if we want to go down though. Yeah.
For starters, like Rachel said, I do like the fact that if that is true, like from his point of view, if that's true where he was just passionate and he was just standing up for his guys, I like that. I want a GM. I want a guy in charge that's willing to back up his guys, whether they're the best in the league or not. If he's willing to go to bat for his guys, I think that's good. I think that shows a lot about him. But I don't think that's what the point of the question was. I think it was more of, hey, you went to bat for your guys, and then your guys didn't really go to bat for you. Like, they didn't show up. So what about, like, how does that make you feel, I guess? And he just didn't really answer that part of it.
Are you talking about yesterday or back in April when the thing happened?
Both.
Okay.
So he went to bat for his guys in April, and then yesterday he said, "Well, me doing that wasn't anything against anybody. It was just me standing up for my guys who they can't stand up for themselves, so I'm standing up for them." But I think the point of the question yesterday was more of, "Hey, you stood up for these guys, and they didn't perform. So where do we go from here? Like, what does that say?" And I don't really think he answered that question. I do think he still believes in his guys, and I don't expect him to go throw them under the bus, although Pagula had already thrown Keon Coleman under the bus. But I don't expect him to stay there and be like, you know what, I was wrong. They all suck. They all sucked. Like, he's not going to say that. So
He could say I was wrong for acting in that way.
Yes, no, yeah. I do agree, but I think he could have. Yes, he definitely could have been like, listen, I was wrong for saying that. I was just standing up for my guys, but I could have handled it better. I do agree that that's probably the way you should have gone.
Getting a mea culpa out of the GM isn't really like any goal right now. Like, it doesn't really matter. I mean, we do, as in the media, have to ask about that, because at the end of the day, he made it clear that he was pounding the table, convinced he had done well at receiver, and everything that happened after that said no, including what happened at the end of the season. The only thing that really matters, though, is does he learn a lesson? Because if the Bills roll into next season with the same type of receiver group, then we have a problem. And I don't think Brandon Beane has never been that guy. One thing that was good about Beane and McDermott, they never tried to be the smartest guy in the room. If something obvious is there that they need to do different, they would do it different. McDermott even transitioned all the way through his coaching career doing different things. So I don't think Beane's going to be the kind of guy to go into next year looking at, hey, everybody eats. We don't need good receivers. They're going to try and address that position again. One of the other topics about how this ended was the relationship between Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane. Rachel and I talked yesterday about how we don't think there was a power play, but beyond that, there were questions about whether or not maybe the relationship, things had just soured in general. Here's how it was addressed yesterday.
I don't think that's anything dissolved. I think that was the decision he made. We were still communicating through last draft, through last offseason. It was a heavy defensive draft. And Sean was very involved, and his coaches. So I don't think it got to a point where we were signing or drafting players, out of alignment.
Everybody has their input, and not everyone agrees on everything you do inside that organization. That doesn't mean relationships dissolve. It's just, to me, it's healthy. You foster debate. I disagree with you. Like, this guy's told me to F off a couple times. Trust me.
Okay, so first of all, I don't think Brandon Beane has ever told Terry Pagula to F off. I don't think Brandon Beane has told anyone to F off lately. I mean, I think it's not the kind of guy he is. Certainly no one says that to Terry Pagula. Separate of all of that, Caleb, where do you think the relationship between Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane really was after the clues we got yesterday in this press conference?
I don't think it was as sour as we might think it was. I definitely think there was probably some disagreement there. I mean, you don't get to a point like this with there just being no problems. Like, you're not just holding hands, running through a sunflower field, and then all of a sudden Sean McDermott's fired. So I do think that there was probably some disagreements, but I think the larger disagreement was between Terry and Sean. To me, it feels like that's where the bigger problem was. There were the reports that came out about how there were meetings and Terry and Brandon Beane didn't really agree with Sean McDermott. Terry Pagula shut that down. I don't know if that exact report is true, but I guarantee you there were some meetings where not everybody came out of the room extremely happy. Based off this press conference, it seems that Brandon Beane had some disagreements, but was willing to get past them. And maybe Terry Pagula wasn't willing to get past them.
I think it's a decent read. I think you're right about, at some point, there were meetings that were, at the very least, uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I feel like, I don't think their relationship, Beane and McDermott, that is, really fell off in the end from the, I mean, obviously, like you said, disagreements happen. But because Pagula was so adamant that this was his decision and this was a very, in the moment this happened decision, I don't feel like Brandon Beane and McDermott's relationship had time to sour before this went south. I mean, I think it was just a Pagula making this decision, and Brandon Beane was kind of just like, I mean, you're the owner and this is how it goes. Even the way the tone of this press conference. It was a lot of Pegula saying things and kind of Brandon being, I mean, even being interrupted at times for Pegula to step in and say things, or him saying things and maybe it looked like Brandon Bean was kind of like maybe holding on like to see what was going to come next. So for me, I feel like there could have been those disagreements, and obviously when your team isn't doing what you want them to do and you're done in the postseason, like there's going to be disagreements. But I feel like this was more of a Terry Pegula thing, like Caleb said, than a Brandon Bean and McDermott issue.
I love the point you just made about there's going to be disagreements. There probably were disagreements in year 3, year 5. It's very possible whatever the disagreements were this year could have been things they could have gotten past, especially if they had somehow gone to a Super Bowl. I like also, Caleb, what you said about dancing through the fields and sunflowers, which is fantastic imagery. To that point, though, I don't know if I'd quite go there, but I think there had to be some degradation in the relationship, if only because you would think if everything was hunky-dory and they were kumbaya and roasting marshmallows and everything, that Brandon Bean would have probably stepped up to Terry and said, hey, I don't know if this is the right call. Mm-hmm. And now, look, doesn't mean he can convince him that if there's ever going to be a time for the F off that Terry talked about, that would have been it. But it doesn't seem like Brandon Bean, and one of the regrets, we're going to get this in a minute, was not finding out Brandon Bean's reaction to the firing. I would have thought that if their relationship was super strong, that he might have even said, over my dead body, and either, we both stay or we both go. And that clearly did not happen. I might be assuming a little too much there, but I do think that proves there was not a great relationship happening.
I do agree with you, but also to that point, based off the timeline that Terry Pegula gave, it doesn't really seem like Brandon Bean had much of an opportunity
to retort.
To say that. That's fair. It doesn't really seem like Pegula gave anybody a chance to say, no, I don't like this.
Let's move to the BKL Nightly Roundtable. First question is, it wasn't great, but how much damage did that press conference do to the Bills going forward, especially when it comes to a coaching search? Rachel, you can go first.
From the perspective of a coaching search, I think it could have done some harm. I mean, just looking at, like I said, the dynamic between Pegula and Bean, that's maybe not a dynamic that a coach would want to step into. And then another kind of aspect of it is, we talked about this yesterday, Josh Allen is potentially going to be higher up than, the head coach as far as just the hierarchy of the Bills are right now. And a lot of the press conference yesterday was focused on Josh Allen. Even at one point, I think it was Pegula said, we have an MVP quarterback and we need to get him a Super Bowl. It was never this team needs to get a Super Bowl. It was a lot of Josh Allen is the center of this conversation, which is, there was the whole separate conversation we could have about this. And obviously Josh Allen is the reason the Bills have been in the playoffs these last stretch of years. But I think that also could be damaging to a coach that doesn't want to be in that situation and doesn't want to be second to Josh Allen, because your owner is sitting here saying, we need to get a Super Bowl. Josh Allen needs a Super Bowl, not the Bills, not our team. Josh Allen needs a Super Bowl. So I feel like that could have done some harm in that aspect.
That might have been what the coach is going to walk into anyway, regardless, but it is a good point. Caleb?
As a fan, I'm much less confident in Terry Pegula and the relationship at the top of the food chain for the Buffalo Bills. Now, I've never been in a front office, in an NFL front office. I've never been an NFL head coach, probably never will be an NFL head coach. But to me, I don't know how much damage it does, particularly in finding a coach. One, Brian Daboll has been there. He knows the relationship. He knows Terry Pegula. He knows Brandon Bean. I think if he was uncomfortable going back, I don't think he would have even interviewed. So I don't think we'd be even talking about him if he was uncomfortable. And then when it comes to OCs, offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators are on that list. There's even a running back coach on their list of interviewees. Again, never been in a front office. I think from their point of view, if they're offered a job to coach Josh Allen, I think they'll be okay with there being a little bit of, I don't know what the word, just not everything being completely right at the top. I think they're okay with being okay, it's fine. This is my first head coaching opportunity. I'm coaching the best quarterback in the NFL. I'll take it.
I think it's a good point, because I was about to say that there had to be some damage done, but when you consider the pool, I think they only could have done damage to people who have the ability to say no, or the willingness to say no.
Which there aren't any available.
Brian Daboll's not on that list. The first-year coordinators, probably none of them are on that list, because there's not a Ben Johnson available this year who has choices. Mm-hmm. There are guys who might have a couple of different interviews, but I think it's a good point that based on who's available from a coaching search, it probably didn't hurt the Bills one bit. Guys, what do you wish was said or asked differently at the press conference yesterday? Caleb?
I kind of struggled with this one. It's a little bit basic, but I wish that we would have gotten a little bit better of an answer on why McDermott was fired. I'm just still not satisfied with they lost to the Broncos. And, Pagula was even questioning on it like, well, if you're saying that they lost because of a call, if that's kind of your mindset, then why are you firing McDermott off of a call? And he never really went deeper than just the Broncos game. He even said at one point, it wasn't even a thought until after the game. And then just like that, a couple days later, he's fired. It kind of just felt like it felt very out of the blue to everybody here. And he kind of made it seem like it was out of the blue to him. And then he didn't really give much of an explanation. And if it was just out of the blue, then I don't know how much better of an explanation he could have given. But I think if anything, I would have liked to know a little bit more about, there had to have been other things that went into this.
It's a good one. We did try that multiple times.
I know.
Yeah, and just
I know.
nothing
To the media. It's just he didn't say anything.
Rachel?
I wish there was more accountability from Brandon Beane and from Pagula of Brandon Beane, because they kept going back and forth saying, this team has made the playoffs for so many years. You don't do that without a good roster. But I think they had to acknowledge at some point that Brandon Beane did not do enough for the offense this year. And that is a big reason as to why they are no longer in the playoffs. And there was really no acknowledgement of the fact they kept saying they have this good roster, but then they mentioned the practice squad and, people having to come out. Like, there was just a mixed bag of, it was very contradicting at times. I just wish there would have been more accountability of that piece of what didn't happen this year.
2 for me. I did want to, like I said before, get Beane's take on the firing. What was his reaction when Pagula tells him that he had been fired? And then the question I wanted to ask, and even though we got like 55 minutes, it still felt like we could have done 30 or 35 more, no problem. How much do the Sabres' failures to find a coach and a GM impact how Terry approaches this decision? And maybe even does it impact his confidence when it comes to making this decision? That would have been like minute 85 question, but it was something that I had in my mind and wanted to throw out there maybe for the next time that we get Terry Pagula in front of a microphone. Last one, we'll do this one kind of quick here. It might be a while for the Bills to get a new head coach, especially if they want to interview someone who makes a Super Bowl, because they can't talk to any of these guys who are left until they are eliminated. Are you okay, Rachel, waiting if it's got to be February 14th when the Bills hire a coach?
I think I'm okay with it just because there's really no person on the list that they had mentioned yesterday and then the potential people available after the Super Bowl. There's no one that really stands out to me as being the person who's going to get the Bills to the Super Bowl. So I think it's okay to wait unless they interview Dable. Caleb and I were talking about this. Unless they interview Dable today and thought, this is our guy, then jump on it now. But other than that, I think it's okay to wait because I just don't love the pool of who's out there.
I think Dable will take the job whenever they want to let him take the job right now.
Very similar thought. I don't think there's one guy that stands out above the rest. The Rams defensive coordinator and the Seahawks offensive coordinators, I know those are 2 guys that are getting a lot of looks. So if you really don't like anybody that you interview before you can interview them, then sure, go ahead and take a crack at them. But I think if there's a guy that blows you away, like I think if Daboll does a really good job, or if any of the other guys that are on your list do a really good job, I think you just take them, because I don't really know how much better the guys that you have to wait for are going to be.
So don't hold out if you like what you got.
If you like what you got, go ahead. If you don't like what you got and you want to take a chance, then I'm okay with waiting. But I think you take, if you really like something, I think you go ahead and you just take it.
The concern with waiting, and the only reason I'd say no to this, is that the longer you wait to hire a head coach, the smaller the pool gets for defensive coordinator, offensive line coach, quarterbacks coach, all those other pieces that will be important during the season. But I'm totally with you guys. Get this right. As long as it takes. As long as you got somebody in there by the time you have off-season conditioning in April, I am cool. That's fine with me. All right, that's going to do it for this edition of BKL Nightly. The season is now over. Just so everyone knows, this show will not end. We were going to continue to do this all through the offseason. We're going to go from 4 days a week, or 5 if you include the game day recap show on Sundays, to 2 days a week. Every Monday and Thursday, the 3 of us will be here. We'll have guests. We'll do different stuff. We're going to break down position groups. Well, obviously, we have a coaching search to follow. We'll get into the draft. There'll be plenty to talk about throughout the offseason. So BKL Nightly is not going anywhere. But for today, we are done. That's going to be it for this edition of BKL Nightly. Thanks to everyone, Caleb and Rachel and Josh Reed and Carl Jones and everybody who was on this show, Matt Perino, Tim Graham, all the guys, all season long. We are done now for the 2025 season. The next show, looking ahead to 2026. We will see you then. Thanks again for watching.
Get the Rochester First streaming app today for everything you love from News 8 On Demand, plus exclusive shows you won't see anywhere else. Search ROC and download for free on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV.